15 years of marriage had turned into a quiet, hollow routine. What started as a passionate love story had become a daily performance. The two people going through the motions of a relationship without truly being in one. We shared a house, but not a home. Conversations, but not real connection. A bed, but not intimacy. Somewhere along the way, we had drifted so far apart that even the echoes of what we once had no longer reached me. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Maybe I should have noticed the way Emma, my wife, had been leaving small hints, subtle signs that she was unhappy. But I was too wrapped up in my own world, too distracted to really listen. Until one night when everything changed. It started as a gut feeling, the kind you try to dismiss but can't fully shake. Emma had been distant, her phone always face down, her laughter sounding different, more genuine when she thought I wasn't paying attention. There were more late nights at work, more text messages she quickly hid. I had stopped questioning her absences long ago, assuming I was just being paranoid. But that night, I finally admitted to myself that something was wrong. I did what I never thought I would do. I checked her phone. The messages weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. Justin, a name I had heard in passing, was more than just a friend. The words between them were careful, yet heavy with meaning. I could read between the lines. Late night conversations about things she never talked to me about. Inside jokes I didn't understand. Emotional confessions I hadn't heard from her in years. She had checked out of our marriage a long time ago. I just hadn't been willing to see it. I sat there for what felt like hours, reading and rereading those messages, feeling a strange sense of clarity wash over me. This wasn't about catching her in some grand betrayal. It wasn't about proving her wrong or making her feel guilty. It was about finally seeing the truth, the cold, undeniable fact that Emma had already let go of us. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if maybe I should too. The next morning, I made a decision. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of something deeper, acceptance. I had been holding on to an idea of our marriage, not the reality of it. And if I was being honest with myself, I wasn't in love with her anymore either. I was in love with who we used to be, with the memories of a time when we actually mattered to each other. But memories weren't enough to keep a marriage alive. So instead of fighting to win her back, I let go. That night, instead of climbing into bed beside her, I grabbed a pillow and a blanket and made my way to the guest room. It was the first real step in acknowledging that our marriage was already over. The moment I lay down, the door creaked open. "Why are you sleeping in here?" Emma's voice was hesitant, almost confused. I sighed, staring at the ceiling. "I didn't want to disturb you." She lingered in the doorway, as if she wanted to say more, but then she simply turned and walked away. I expected her to be relieved. Instead, she seemed unsettled. The next morning, she was waiting for me in the living room, her fingers tightly gripping a coffee mug. Her expression was tense, like she had spent the whole night rehearsing what she was about to say. "We need to talk," she said. I sat down across from her, nodding for her to continue. "I don't think this is working anymore," she admitted. "I feel lost, unfulfilled. I don't love you the way I used to." The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They only confirmed what I already knew. I took a slow breath before answering. That sounds fair." She blinked. "Wait, what?" "I said that sounds fair," I repeated. "If you don't love me anymore, I can't change that. I don't want to convince you to stay in something that makes you unhappy." Emma stared at me, clearly expecting resistance. Instead, she was met with understanding, and for some reason, that shook her. "Just like that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "Just like that." For a long time, neither of us spoke. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who wasn't trying to argue or fix things, the one who wasn't begging for her attention. That night, I didn't just sleep in the guest room. I started moving my things there. By the following evening, I had done something I never thought I would. I made plans without considering Emma. I went to a bar, sat alone with a glass of bourbon, and felt the strange weight of freedom settle in. And that's when I met Natalie. Natalie was a coworker. We had always had a friendly rapport, lighthearted flirting that never crossed the line. But tonight, something was different. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in years, I wasn't holding on to my marriage like a lifeline. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, really looked at me, like I wasn't just someone's husband. She slid into the seat across from me, raising an eyebrow. You okay? I let out a small chuckle. I think so. We talked, really talked, about work, about life, about the things we wanted but never had the courage to admit. It felt easy, natural, like I was waking up from a long sleep. Then, as the night stretched on, she leaned closer and asked, So what happens next? I swirled my drink, considering the question. I guess I start living for myself. And for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't scare me. The morning after Becky's confession, I woke up feeling surprisingly calm. Maybe it was because I had already detached myself emotionally, or maybe it was because I had come to terms with our reality. Either way, I wasn't about to fall back into old habits. I wasn't going to beg for her affection or try to fix something that had been broken for far too long. Becky was already in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked up from her cup of coffee, her eyes hesitant. Did you sleep well? She asked. I nodded, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. Better than I have in a long time. She flinched at that, but I didn't say it to hurt her. It was just the truth. For years, I had been restless, overthinking everything, replaying our arguments, wondering where things went wrong. But now? Now I had let go. I meant what I said last night, she said quietly. I never slept with anyone else. I kissed a few men, but I never went further. I just. She stopped herself, taking a deep breath. I felt lonely. I leaned against the counter, studying her. And what about now? She shrugged, looking down. I don't know. I didn't expect you to move on so fast. I chuckled, shaking my head. Neither did I, but here we are. I took a sip of water before adding, You were the one who wanted the divorce, Becky. You were the one who said you didn't love me anymore. What did you expect me to do? Sit around and mourn our marriage while you figured yourself out? She swallowed hard, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: regret. I don't know what I expected, she admitted. I guess I thought you'd fight for me. I let out a humorless laugh. I fought for you for years, Becky. I tried everything. I listened when you complained. I changed. I gave you space. But nothing worked. You had already made up your mind. I paused, then added, and I realized that I deserve to be happy too. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Becky nodded, her expression unreadable. So, are you seeing someone now? I smirked. I have a few dates lined up. She blinked rapidly as if trying to process the words. Already? I shrugged. What's stopping me? She didn't answer, and I could see the battle she was fighting within herself. It was almost ironic. She had wanted to leave, but now that she saw me moving on, she wasn't so sure anymore. I wasn't going to dwell on it. I had plans. That evening, I had a date with Lisa, a woman I had met through a mutual friend. She was smart, confident, and had a great sense of humor. Over dinner, we talked about everything: life, relationships, personal goals. I have to admit, Lisa said with a teasing smile, I was a little hesitant about going out with someone who just got out of a long marriage, but you seem at peace with it. I chuckled, sipping my drink. That's because I am. My marriage ended a long time ago. We just hadn't made it official. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. That makes sense. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. No weight of past mistakes, no tension, no silent resentment hanging over me. Just two people enjoying each other's company. After dinner, we took a walk, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her presence. When we reached her car, she hesitated, then smiled. I had a great time tonight. Me too, I admitted. She leaned in, brushing a kiss against my cheek. Call me. I nodded, watching as she drove away. As I made my way home, I felt lighter. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I was done being stagnant. When I walked through the door, Becky was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. "You're home late," she noted. I raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you care?" She exhaled sharply. "I'm just asking." I shrugged off my jacket. "I had a date." Her lips parted slightly, but she quickly masked her reaction. "Was it fun?" "It was," I said simply. "She's a great woman." Becky pressed her lips together. "I see." I didn't miss the way her hands clenched slightly, but I didn't comment on it. Instead, I turned toward the stairs. "Good night, Becky." She didn't respond right away, and just as I reached the top of the stairs, she called out, "Timothy?" I stopped but didn't turn around. "Are you really over us?" I took a deep breath before answering. "Yes." And with that, I walked into my room, closing the door behind me. But as I lay in bed that night, I had a feeling this wasn't the end of the conversation. Something told me Becky wasn't as ready to let go as she had thought. The morning after my date with Lisa, I felt refreshed, lighter even. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight of my failed marriage. I was moving forward and I liked the direction I was heading. But as expected, Becky wasn't handling it well. She had spent the past few days watching me closely, making small comments here and there, trying to gauge my emotions. She wasn't as indifferent as she pretended to be, and now that she knew I was seeing someone, something in her had shifted. I wasn't sure what it was: guilt, regret, or was it just the realization that I was no longer waiting for her? Whatever it was, I wasn't about to entertain it. That afternoon, I was in the kitchen making coffee when Becky walked in. She hesitated before speaking. "Do you have plans tonight?" I glanced at her. "Yeah, why?" She bit her lip, looking almost nervous. "I was thinking maybe we could talk." I set my mug down. "Talk about what?" She hesitated again, then shrugged. "Just things. Us." I gave her a long look. "Becky, we already talked. You wanted the divorce. I agreed. What's left to say?" She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know. I guess I just—" She stopped herself, then sighed. "Never mind." I wasn't going to push her. If she had something to say, she'd say it. But I wasn't about to put my life on hold for her anymore. "All right," I said simply. "I'll be out tonight." Her expression faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Okay." That evening, I went out with Lisa again. We met at a cozy bar downtown where soft jazz played in the background, and the atmosphere was warm and inviting. She smiled when she saw me. "Well, look who actually called." I chuckled. "I told you I would." We spent hours talking, laughing, and just enjoying each other's company. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people having a good time. At the end of the night, as we walked to our cars, Lisa turned to me with a thoughtful look. "I like spending time with you, Timothy, but I need to know, are you really ready for this? Or are you just trying to prove something to your ex?" I appreciated her honesty. I thought about it answering. "I'm ready," I said. "I'm not looking for anything serious right now, but I'm not doing this to get back at Becky. I'm doing it for me." Lisa studied me for a second, then smiled. "Good answer." She leaned in and kissed my cheek before getting into her car. I watched her drive away, feeling more certain than ever that I was on the right path. When I got home, Becky was waiting for me again. "You're back late," she noted. I raised an eyebrow. "You keep saying that like it matters." She folded her arms. "I just think it's interesting. You never used to go out this much." I smirked. "That's because I was busy trying to save our marriage." She flinched, but I didn't regret saying it. She took a deep breath. "Timothy, do you think we made a mistake?" I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "Number." "The mistake was holding on for as long as we did." She looked down, swallowing hard. I just, I don't know what I expected. I thought I'd feel relieved, but instead, I just feel empty." I nodded. "I know the feeling, but I moved past it." She met my gaze. "And what if I don't want to move past it?" I studied her for a moment, then said the one thing I knew she needed to hear. Becky, you already did. Her eyes widened slightly. I continued, You moved on a long time ago. You just didn't realize it until now. She didn't respond. For years, I had been the one chasing her, trying to make things work. But the moment I stopped, she suddenly started looking back. But I wasn't turning around. I gave her a small nod before heading upstairs. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. This time, I was choosing myself. Becky's words lingered in my mind longer than I expected. And what if I don't want to move past it? That wasn't something I thought I'd hear from her. Not after everything. For years, I had been the one trying to fix us, the one holding on. But now that I was finally letting go, she was the one looking back. It was ironic. But it didn't change anything. I wasn't turning back. The next morning, I found Becky in the kitchen, sipping coffee. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes studying me like she was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter. She sighed. Are we really going to act like last night didn't happen? I took a slow sip before responding. What exactly happened, Becky? Her jaw tightened. You know what I mean. I met her gaze. No, I don't. You asked a question? I answered. That's it. She exhaled, looking away. I don't know why I expected a different reaction. I shrugged. Maybe because you're used to me chasing after you. Her eyes flicked back to mine, and I saw a flash of something. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. I never wanted to hurt you, she said quietly. I studied her. But you did. She didn't argue. She just nodded, staring down at her coffee. For the first time in a long time, I realized something. Becky wasn't as sure of herself as I had always thought. She had made her choices, but now she was questioning them. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I finished my coffee and set my mug down. I'm heading out. She looked up. With Lisa? I smirked. Does it matter? She hesitated, then shook her head. I guess not. I grabbed my keys and walked out without looking back. Lisa and I met at a park that afternoon. It was peaceful, the sun was out, the breeze was nice, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. She smiled when she saw me. You seem relaxed, I chuckled. I am. We sat on a bench, watching the lake as we talked about everything and nothing. At one point, Lisa glanced at me, a curious look in her eyes. So, what's next for you? I thought about it. I don't know, but for once, I'm okay with that. She smiled. That's a good answer. It was. For years, my life had been about trying to fix something that was already broken. But now I was finally focusing on myself. And it felt good. When I got home that evening, Becky was waiting for me again. But this time, she wasn't standing in the kitchen or trying to start a conversation. She was packing. I paused in the doorway, watching her as she folded her clothes and placed them in a suitcase. She looked up when she noticed me. I found an apartment, she said simply. I nodded. That's good. She hesitated before continuing. I think I just needed time to accept everything. But now I get it. We can't go back. I met her gaze. No, we can't. She sighed, a small, sad smile on her lips. Then it's time for me to move on too. I nodded. Yeah, it is. There were no harsh words, no anger, just understanding. She had finally accepted it, and so had I. A week later, Becky officially moved out. Lisa and I continued seeing each other, but we took things slow. I focused on my own happiness for the first time in years, and I realized something. Letting go wasn't just about walking away, it was about moving forward. And that's exactly what I was doing.